All right, so thank you everyone for joining this session with Joe Chang from Aramco. My name is Brian Wong. I'm the moderator. So Joe, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
You've got 2 decades of multi-industry experience, former McKinsey consultant, stints at Microsoft and Cisco, investment partner at SoftBank and Fidelity's 8 Roads. Now you're at Prosperity 7, which is a venture fund, and part of Aramco. How many of you guys have heard of Aramco? All right, Yang, very good. Well, for those of you who don't know what Aramco is, it's the largest company in the world with a market capitalization of probably over $2 trillion. All right, that's T for trillion. Prosperity 7 is part of Aramco. Aramco is actually the world's largest oil producing company in Saudi Arabia. So literally, they just need to drill a hole in the ground and they're making money, right? So while that's a really enviable position to be in as a company, it seems that Aramco and the Saudi kingdom for that matter is really on a mission to diversify into other areas other than oil and gas. So Aramco set up Prosperity 7, the venture capital firm, with an eye on the future. Joe, maybe you could explain to us just a little bit more about the significance of this fund, but also where did the name Prosperity 7 come from? What's the symbolism of that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Brian, and thanks everybody. So Prosperity 7 is the proprietary ventures arm for Saudi Aramco, where our first fund was $1 billion, which we're just about to finish deploying over the past 3 years. Our second fund has been announced and approved, and we'll be deploying from that very shortly for another $2 billion. Okay, and the fund is first and foremost going after financial returns, but we are, we have an existential purpose, and that purpose and that mandate is to invest in the most disruptive innovation, technologies, applications in the world that we can find, okay, with the intent of, not necessarily immediately, but one day being able to bring that back to Saudi Arabia to help contribute to the transformation of Aramco and the kingdom away from oil and gas to diversify the economy. And so the name Prosperity 7 reflects that mission, right? So Prosperity 7 is actually the very first oil well that in the 1930s found commercial oil in the Saudi desert. So we basically dug 6 holes, didn't find anything. The 7th well was called the Prosperity Well, and that was the well that found the gusher and brought forth prosperity, not just to Aramco and the kingdom, but the world, in terms of fueling the industrial revolution. So we picked that name because we're essentially looking for the next oil well. We're looking for the next source of wealth for the kingdom and really for the world, right? And so we are aiming to invest in things that are game-changing, that are going to really impact humanity and the world. And so that's the background that we have. I will say that we are not a corporate venture capital firm. We are investing with financial returns in mind. And the reason for that is, with the mission, we basically analyzed sort of venture and corporate VC and found that the biggest and most interesting and most disruptive investments that have been made over time have been with the Sequoias and the benchmarks of the world, right? Those that were driven by financial returns. And so we invest with that in mind through that lens in order to realize this goal of finding the disruption.
Thank you, Joe, for that explanation. It sounds like the aspirations are immense, what you guys hope to achieve with Prosperity 7, given that background. Was there a movie made about that when they discovered oil in Saudi Arabia? I thought that... Okay.
If there was, I did not see it.
All right. So look, so this is your firm, Prosperity 7. You're based in China. So how does that fit into the sort of Saudi perspective? What are some areas that you're looking at specifically within your region? I know Saudi they themselves have some ambitious projects going on within the country, like NEOM, for example. I think it's like a $1.5 trillion project to build the city of the future. I mean, so how do China investments fit into that, but also into the larger global picture? Yeah.
Sure. Well, first of all, Prosperity 7 is a global fund. So we invest agnostic to geography. So we will be willing to invest anywhere in the world. But the two markets, or the two geos that we've been primarily focused on initially have been China and the United States. Simply because we just feel like, that's where most of the disruptive innovation is going to come. That having been said, we do have portfolios from Europe in our stable. We even have one investment in Australia. But in terms of boots on the ground, it's been limited to Beijing, Shanghai office, as well as a Palo Alto office. That's going to change with our second fund. So the second fund, we are going to be opening up offices in India as well as in Europe. Okay. In terms of China and why that's important to us, I mentioned earlier, we do believe that there's a lot of innovation coming out of China. And in particular, I would say that, there's going to be some areas where different parts of the world, are in a position to lead, and there's areas that China, I think will lead and will be interesting for us, right? Again, we just want to find the most disruptive innovation no matter where it be. And China has a really strong track record of innovating, particularly around applications, right? I think the previous, talk probably discussed that. Just in the internet era, right? They weren't the first to bring, services on the internet, but they've been very active in building leading applications. I mean, if you just look at things like, TikTok versus an Instagram, right? You look at WeChat versus, say, Facebook. I think the argument can be made that in terms of how the mobile internet has impacted, daily life or how we work, China leads in many respects. We believe that will continue to go in some of the areas that we're most interested in. And I'd say AI and robotics in particular, that's an area that we think is going to be transformative, right, to the world. Really on par with how the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolutions changed how we worked and lived, right? And I think what we're seeing with AI and robotics being an extension of AI in terms of how AI is going to impact the physical world, that's going to be hugely transformative, even more so than the internet was for us, okay? And we believe, I think there's an argument to be made that China will, as in the internet side of things, not necessarily lead in terms of things like scientific discovery, right? That's an area that the U.S. has continued to be, have an advantage with Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, that sort of thing. But China has, the ability to scale and land applications unlike anywhere else, right? From 1 to 100, if you will. And I think that you're going to even see that even more pronounced with AI and robotics because of need. And the need in China, I think, has to do with their demographics, right? So China, because of the one-child policy, is seeing a declining population. They're seeing a aging population with an elderly cohort that needs care, okay? But they are also seeing a shrinking labor force. So they're kind of in desperation of finding, or using technology to solve these problems, right? Who's going to, I think I read somewhere that some economists actually believe that, China's economic growth or continued ability to, lead the world in economic growth is going to be at risk because of the labor force shortage. And we're already seeing that in factories, we're seeing that in, F&B and in services. Where a number of companies cannot find the labor that they're looking for. And so just at this point where you're seeing, this problem, you have now these technologies where you're going to begin to see, AI and robotics begin to replace, what human beings can do. And so that need is really going to drive, a lot of the innovative applications, both on the, I think on the consumer side, but also on the, in the industrial side.
So you talked about these innovative applications. You talked about scalability. I mean, are you saying that there are lots of other countries or markets that are or will be facing similar challenges as China, and therefore this technology will be highly relevant? Is that really the attractiveness of this China market and the innovations that come out?
Well, I think clearly there are a number of countries that
Yeah.
have a declining workforce
Yeah.
as well. But if we just take it to Saudi Arabia, given the aspirations we have, right, with if you're familiar with Vision 2030,
Yeah.
the vision that the country is trying to transform its economy and everything that they're trying to do, it's very, very bold,
Yeah.
right? And in order to accomplish that, it's clear that we have to rely on technology. I mean, the country only has 30 million people,
Yeah.
right? But for the aspirations of what they're going to try to do, they have to rely on technology. And so where is that technological innovation, the application of that technology to, both replace human labor, but also complement it and make it much more productive? Where do we think that's going to happen? First, we actually believe that China will be the source of a lot of that, innovation and first landing.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe you could share a few examples of companies in your portfolio that sort of reflect this investment thesis further, and how these contribute to your mandate, like some specific companies and the kind of technology you guys like.
Yeah, I think I'll pick a couple companies that I find to be really reflective of what we're trying to do, right, and the types of companies that we invest in. One of them is Fourier Intelligence, which is a robotics company based in Shanghai. They initially started out as a rehabilitation robotics company, using exoskeletons and other robotics technology to help rehabilitation patients. But if you ask the CEO, Alex Gu, what his initial vision was and his aspiration, it was to build humanoid robots, okay? And that's in fact what he has done, right, and what they have done. So they've recently pivoted or introduced their GR1 humanoid robot last July, as one of the pioneering humanoids really in the world. And they were recently featured at the NVIDIA GTC conference, okay? But where rehabilitation really sort of led to what they were able to do is that a lot of the locomotion that you have with rehabilitation robots, that can enable the training for what you would need for the humanoid, right? It also enabled them to develop in-house actuators, which by being in-house, they're actually able to get significant cost advantage, right? Even compared to other some other Chinese producers. So in addition to that, so what we liked about that is rather than just kind of build a humanoid from scratch, you had sort of a path to generate some cash, right? And also gradually move into something that could benefit from the training data that you have on the rehabilitation and the component development. And what we also foresee with Fourier is that the rehabilitation business will help them land applications of that humanoid. They operate rehabilitation centers as a part of their business model, and through that we know that there's a shortage of nurses, right, in this area. So being able to have humanoids help to take care of patients in these rehabilitation centers is going to train them not just to take care of rehabilitation patients, but the next step is, okay, can you take care of the elderly, right? Yeah. Because there's a lot of very similar things, and so that's a huge problem for China, right? Given the demographics.
And Japan.
And Japan and others.
Yeah.
But beyond that, what we're doing with them, Aramco, does have agreements in place to land their rehabilitation robotics with Johns Hopkins Aramco Healthcare. So that's our network of hospitals and clinics that service the Aramco community. But what we're also doing is we signed an MOU recently at LEAP, where we will be working together with them to land humanoid robots in industrial case scenarios, right? And so we've actually, one of the things we've done is we built the world's largest industrial foundational model based on 90 years of industrial data, okay, called the MetaBrain. And so we will, be working with them to apply the MetaBrain, for the humanoid, for these industrial use cases. So imagine, for instance, we're very interested in applying humanoids for safety, right? To take the human out of the equation and to keep them away from hazardous situations. Well, we have 90 years of safety incidents data that is, really unique and can really be applied to that. And so, that's the type of thing that we like to do. The second one.
Just curious,
Go ahead.
how do Fourier's robots, humanoid robots, compare to Boston Dynamics humanoid robots?
Well, I think, they're two different things, right? I think if you look at Boston Dynamics, and Aramco, by the way, was an investor in Boston Dynamics. The Boston Dynamics robots can do flips and they can do crazy things, right? But and the Fourier robot cannot do those flips, okay?
No
but
gymnastics.
we really don't need it to do, right? We just need them to lift things, navigate through areas that a human can do and do work that humans can do. We don't need them to go and do flips. But where Fourier and I think China is going to lead in robotics is going to be with cost and practical application, right? Because if you have a $200,000 bomb, robot, okay? I don't know how many applications you have for that. But, at scale, we're going to expect, Fourier and other Chinese humanoid robots to be under 10,000 US.
Okay.
Okay, and by the way, these robots will work 24/7, even more so than the 996 of a Chinese worker, right? And they don't go home for the holidays. They're not going to quit, right? And you don't have to go and retrain them or worry about, recruiting them. So I think it's going to have, a profound application. But this is an example of, where they're going to land, faster than I think anywhere in the world.
Great. No, thank you for that clarification. I just was curious. There's another company you want to share?
Yeah, sure. I think the other company I'd bring up is In Silico Medicine. Their exhibition is actually right behind us here.
Okay.
And In Silico is an AI company that is applying artificial intelligence to help discover new drugs. Okay, and so that's obviously something that is really consistent with our ethos, right? We want to invest in things that are really good for the world, good for society, and curing diseases, is something that's very difficult to get away from in order to, be consistent with that mandate. And so In Silico has been, one of the, I think I was actually the first company that's basically landing a target molecule to have a drug that's already in phase 2 trials, okay? But what we really like about them as well is we're using their molecular simulation to extend beyond drug discovery and now into areas that Aramco is much more deep into. So for instance, we want to find molecules to help develop formulations for more sustainable fuels, right? And for materials that will help with carbon capture. And this is all to enable us to reach our net zero emission, goals, right? And so, in a way, we're working with In Silico to extend their general chemistry that has been curing diseases to now general chemistry to help cure planetary, problems.
That's fascinating. Because normally you hear about these types of companies with just drug discovery. You're extending that into much broader applications. Okay. Joe, there's probably a few entrepreneurs in the audience here today as well. And I think that with a fund like yours, is sizable, particularly for venture, but also in terms of the resources that you bring, people are probably curious to know what are the sort of traits that you look for in a business. Because you want game-changing businesses. You want ones that are going to really shift the paradigm. But also, what do you look for in terms of the founders that you invest in? Yeah.
Okay, so I think there's three key things we always look for, right? Number one, first and foremost, how disruptive and how innovative is this? We're not looking for incremental, improvements. We're looking for game-changing things that are just going to, change the way we do things. So that's the first question we look at. The second one is scalability, okay, and the ability to get really, really big, right? I think especially for a fund of our size, we do venture. It's not so much PE, but venture. We want to invest in companies that can be tens of billions, and most of the companies we invest in may not get there, but we want to invest for that, possibility. Simply because for a fund our size, if you're not able to get to that size, it's not going to be able to impact our fund performance.
What's your average ticket size?
We're investing 5 to 30 million.
5 to 30 million.
With
okay.
the second fund that's increasing, but for the most part, we want to go after 20 to 50x returns on the upside, right? And like I said, not everything's going to do that, but we believe in the power law, right? So we want to make sure that, if this fund's successful, that we do, if we do 50 investments and we have 2 or 3, right, that really make a difference, that's going to bring impact not just to our fund, but to Aramco and to the kingdom and then to the world, right? And then the third thing we look for is resilience, right? Yeah. So, what that means is how can you extend or how can you maintain leadership, either through intellectual property, other barriers of entry, as well as execution. And that goes to the other part of your question, which is the founders, right? And what we look for there. We look for founders who are really committed, right? Who really believe in what they're trying to do, not just trying to flip, make money and get out, really quickly, but again, really consistent with what we're trying to do, which is to change the world. And then we look at everything from, a track record. We love serial entrepreneurs, and even entrepreneurs who failed, right? Because they've learned from those failures. And we look at the team, right? And are they able to assemble a team that can, go beyond technical expertise, but really be able to land that and get that done. And the team really is one of the key, important things that we look for. You can have the best ideas in the world, but if you can't land it, you can't make something, happen, then it really doesn't help. Right?
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. So any entrepreneurs out there that are looking to raise some sizable funds, please know what Joe is looking for in terms of the company profile, but also the entrepreneurs themselves. Joe, if you were to have a crystal ball in terms of, because I think as an investor, you also have to have a view on where the world is headed and how things and trends will evolve. Crystal ball 20 years out. What does the world look like? How does this game-changing technology impact the way we live our lives?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't have any idea, right, to be honest, because I think things are changing so fast, and they're going to be changing at a pace that none of us have ever seen, in a large part because of AI, right, and what AI is going to enable us to do. But, I'm an optimist. I think whatever changes are happening, they're going to be good for humanity. Okay, there's a lot of problems we have to solve in terms of how we harness this. How do we make sure that, AI doesn't, take us off the rails? But I think in the end, what we've seen before with the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, is where technology has changed our lives, really disrupted it, right? But disrupted it for the better. Okay, and so I think that what we're going to end up having is a world where, a lot of things are going to be a lot cheaper, almost free, right? Because of how easy it's going to be to manufacture, to develop, to do all the things that we do today, and what that means for us in terms of the way we spend our time, I don't know. Maybe it means we're spending a lot more time doing the things that we want to do, or it's maybe more like the agricultural industrial revolution, which is we stop doing some of the things that we're doing, but do new things. Okay. And I think what you're going to have is a world where you have a lot more abundance. And I think that abundance, again, speaking as an optimist, I think that abundance is going to help us, gain more equity, across the world. But I think hopefully with that abundance, we'll have less conflict, and everyone will, hopefully be able to get along.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. Everybody, Joe Chang, managing partner of Prosperity 7, China, and Aramco, don't forget, one of the largest companies in the world, $2 trillion, but really putting that money to good use for innovations and helping the world through technology. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone.